Good afternoon, everyone, on this warm and cloudy Veterans Day. For those of you that don't know, I'm Nina Woodward, Director of Chase Emerson Memorial Library, located in Deer Isle. And I'm so pleased you were all able to join us today for Neuroscience and Nature, Finding Balance in Turbulent Times, presented by Corie Washow. Corie was born and raised outside of Chicago and has spent most of her adult life in Maine after wandering this way for Colby College. She has over 2 decades of experience working in the social services and environmental education fields. She has advanced degrees in both education, Lesley University, and clinical mental health counseling from Antioch University, New England, and practices as a licensed counselor in the state of Maine. Specific training and practice in ecotherapy guides her current work. Ecotherapy is the practice of healing in reciprocal relationship with the natural world. Corie is an experienced educator, facilitator, and therapist, and presently provides individual and group counseling for teens and adults, guided nature connection experiences, and educational programming based in nature relationship. Additional formative experiences includes many years as a hospice volunteer, nonprofit board member, and step-parent. Corie practices in Freeport and lives in Durham with her partner, dogs, garden, and countless wild creatures. Please join me in welcoming Corie as she presents Neuroscience and Nature, Finding Balance in Turbulent Times.
Thank you so much, Nina, for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for being here. It always feels really special when I have a group of people to talk to and share something that I'm really passionate about, something that I've seen be really supportive in my own life and in the life of my clients. So I really appreciate you all taking some time out of your day to join me here. And I'm going to share my screen, and Nina can let me know if that doesn't work. Oops, it might not work because it says host disabled attendee screen sharing, which is totally fine. So we can just go ahead without sharing a screen and I can just talk to you. But no, in saying that, I just want to name that Zoom fatigue is a real thing. So please feel free to not look at the screen at all. Get yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you want to, look out a window, look at a beautiful picture of nature. Don't feel like you need to maintain eye contact with me or the screen at all. So first, if you're tuning in today or if you're tuning in later, I just want to name, it makes so much sense that you're looking for ways to find more balance right now. This is a really, we all know the adjectives turbulent, unprecedented, challenging, all those things that are really true and we're almost tired of hearing. But what they mean to our nervous systems is very real, that it's really hard to feel safe. It's really hard to feel connected. And with those kinds of stressors, our nervous systems on a very unconscious, on a very physiological level, are really wired to react, to fight, to flight, to freeze. We're always in react mode when we're perceiving threat all around us. And this year, in ways that we haven't likely experienced in our lives, there is threat all around us, and our nervous systems respond to that, whether we like it or not, or whether we choose it or not. So if you're feeling exhausted, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like you can't get things done, if you're feeling like emotions are bigger than they used to be, that all makes such perfect sense and is so normal and so human. And please know that you don't need to layer extra pain of judgment for any of that on top of the existing very real stressors that are here right now. As Nina already did a lovely introduction, I don't have a lot to add to that, except my own kind of a little personal background of how I ended up in all those steps that Nina shared. When I was a kid, I was kind of an awkward kid, kind of an awkward grown up, but more okay with that now. But as a kid, that felt really, really uncomfortable, and I didn't feel like I fit in at school. My family didn't feel very connected and we're kind of off in our own worlds all the time. So for me, when I was outdoors in the woods, that was when I felt at home. That's when I felt comfortable. That's when I felt safe. That's when I felt like I could really be myself and not worry about the gaze of others or be how I was supposed to be or anything like that. So the connection with the natural world has always been very close to my heart. And as I grew older and was looking for work, I think I was really seeking that experience of connection, and that sent me towards the social services in a variety of ways and working with people, which was wonderful. And I deeply enjoyed that work and learned a lot from it. and recognized after a few years that there was something really missing in sort of our industry standard and our cultural standard of what social services and support means. And what was missing was relationship with the earth. Like that wasn't there at all. And I really felt that gap. So I went back to school to get a master's in environmental ed, had an amazing time connecting with the earth at that time and connecting with the planet and understanding more about the environment and science, and did that work in a variety of ways. And after a few years also thought, wait, there's something missing here. And what's missing here is actually people. A lot of the work in the environmental field is about preservation and conservation and protection of the natural world from the humans, which is important. Don't get me wrong, we need that. Um, but it doesn't necessarily allow for a lot of human and nature relationship. And I felt that was a real lack in that field. For me personally, I think it's all very valuable work, but for me personally, I felt holes in that way. So I decided to go back to school again and find a way to bridge those. And that is what I do now in my counseling work that's embedded in ecotherapy. And I get to have this amazing, amazing job where I get to support human and natural well-being in relationship with each other, because I really do believe that humans need to be in relationship with the earth, and the earth needs to be in healthy relationship with humans for both of us to survive and thrive. So that's what I get to do now, and I really love it. And I just want to give a couple caveats before I get started. And one is that I was born with a really science-oriented brain, and I want the facts and I want the research and I want to prove it. And I also have this other really hippie heart that just wants to feel and connect and experience. I spent, I think, especially in younger years, those could be in battle, and one would judge the other. And at this point in my life, I'm really thankful that I can hold and appreciate both, and they can support each other in my work, in my daily life. And relevant to you all in this hour, I'm going to try to balance the science of what we're doing as well as the experience, so your brain can rest in knowing, oh yeah, this isn't just crazy, there's science to this, and your heart can rest in actually feeling some relief and some experience. I have some resources that Nina will have afterwards. You can also reach out to me for them, for further reading exploration for both. And some of them will kind of speak to the science brain part of you, and some of them will really speak to the heart part of you. So know that everything I go over will be, there'll be many ways to dive into it more deeply moving forward. And we'll just reach out to Nina or myself for those resources. One more caveat before I get going. Obviously, I'm speaking in English. It's the only language I have. It's the language we share. And English is really limiting in terms of speaking authentically about relationship with nature. For one thing, the fact that I say relationship with nature as if humans are not part of nature, as if that's something outside, it's pretty bizarre, actually, and makes sense in our cultural context and in the way we function in the world, in the English-speaking world, but doesn't actually make sense in the broader picture. For the vast majority, 99% of human life, we've lived outdoors and very much as part of nature. It's only this tiny little window where we've separated ourselves in indoor spaces, and really kind of said we are different from and apart from. So I want to acknowledge that our language is inherently a struggle as we try to deepen into relationship with nature more deeply. And it takes some intentional effort to kind of shift that. So one way, this is not my idea, David Abram is a philosopher, an ecological philosopher who offers the term more than human world rather than nature, to sort of indicate that we are all part of the same big world. Humans are this one piece and everything else is here as well, and equally important, if not more important. Another struggle with English is how we objectify nature in so many ways. We think nothing of calling a bird or a tree it. We would never call our pet dog, and certainly not our child, it. So just in those two letters, we do a beautiful job saying that is something else. It is not actually a being. It's not actually something that has its own experience. It is an it. Like it is bleh. It has no agency. There's a lovely author and scientist named Robin Wall Kimmerer. If you haven't read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and you have any interest in this field, that would be my number one recommendation to explore further. She's from the Potawatomi people in upstate New York, what's now known as upstate New York. And she has a PhD in plant biology, and she's very, very well versed in the traditional ecological knowledge of her people. And I'm going to share just this one paragraph from her about the challenges of the English language in ways that are really different than her ancestral language of Potawatomi. She says, quote, "The language that my grandfather was forbidden to speak is composed primarily of verbs, ways to describe the vital beingness of the world. Both nouns and verbs come in two forms, the animate and the inanimate. You hear a blue jay with a different verb than you hear an airplane, distinguishing that which possesses the quality of life from that which is merely an object. Birds, bugs, and berries are spoken of with the same respectful grammar as humans are, as if we were all members of the same family. Because we are. There is no it for nature. Living beings are referred to as subjects, never as objects, and personhood is extended to all who breathe and some who don't. I greet the silent boulder people with the same respect as I do the talkative chickadees." Unquote. And I just love that thought of imagine if we consider the natural world with verbs and animation rather than nouns and objectification. So I try as much as I can to use words like being and creature rather than it. It is a challenge, of course, but no, when that comes up, it's with intention. And the final piece around language is English culture and language has done a really good job considering nature as a resource for human use. It is to extract, it is to commodify, and that is tremendously damaging. If you're watching this, I'm guessing I don't need to explain that to you because you obviously have an inherent interest in nature, and understanding that that model leads to destruction. So the other thing I try to do in my work is make sure that my language indicates reciprocity and not using nature as something for human gain. So always trying to make sure that my work with clients, that my own life is a reciprocal relationship of healing, not just tapping in to the incredible benefits that nature can offer humans. So those are all my caveats before I really dive in. So I'll dive in a little more deeply and first speak to the science part of my brain and maybe your brains if you have those parts too. So there's a ton of research now in the last 10, 15 years that didn't exist before, which is great, that really verifies in a lot of different ways that there is tremendous human benefit to spending time in relationship with the more than human world. Among other things, time in nature increases happiness, mood, connection to other people. It improves memory, motivation, and attention. It increases creativity and problem-solving skills. On a really physiological level, it decreases heart rate and blood pressure and inflammation. So it really has impacts on physiological, emotional, and cognitive realms, which of course those are all connected, but the research bears that out on every level. There's even research, you may have seen this because it was fairly well publicized in the past year. There's even research of just exactly how much time we need to gain those kind of benefits. And that number is 120 minutes a week, which translates into 17 minutes a day, which is pretty doable, especially when you live in a place like Maine and nature is so accessible. So that's one thing I love about this research is that how it validates something that is actually in reach for most people, even urban environments. There's really creative ways to make those 17 minutes happen. So that's something that really excites me that this isn't out of reach. It isn't this whole unattainable thing. It's right here, 17 minutes a day. We can do that together. So in the interest of feeding my and your heart and experience a little bit, I want to just offer this time for you to follow my voice, and you don't need to do anything. Definitely don't look at the screen right now. Feel free to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If not, just a soft focus in front of you. And we're just gonna move into a little bit of a visualization, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It won't be very long. And know that at any point in this, if you're not comfortable, please just stop listening, change your focus, walk away, come back in a few minutes. But if you're comfortable staying with me, the goal here is just to bring a little bit of nature into the room with us, even though we're in this highly digital realm. Luckily, the science says that even digital representations of nature matter. Even visualized representations of nature make a difference. So we just want to bring a little of that in and notice in our own systems and our own bodies if there's a shift when we put our focus on that. So take a minute right now, close your eyes if that's comfortable. Again, soft gaze if it's not. See if you can deepen your breath just a little bit as best you can. Just start noticing where your breath is. It might be kind of shallow in your chest. That's often where breath lands when we're anxious. If you can, just push it a little bit deeper and start noticing if there's any points of tension or stress or sensations in your body right now. Any thoughts in your head that may be indicative of stress or anxiety or worry or concern, which is all totally fine. There's no judgment there, just noticing it right now. Just doing kind of a little self assessment. Where am I at? Where's my head at? Where's my body at? Where's my heart at? If you want to, just jot that down. If not, just tuck that away in your brain somewhere. That noticing of your state at this time, what your nervous system is telling you. And then shift your focus from that noticing just to your breath, to just trying to shift it down a little bit, all the way into your belly if you can, but if not, that's okay. And as you're breathing, noticing the feeling of your seat in your chair, your feet on the ground. If there's any shifts you need to make to be just a little more comfortable, feel free. If there's any tension you can ease in your body, try to let that go. If you can't, no judgment. As you're breathing and settling, I want you to open your brain and kind of cast over the experience of your life from now all the way back to childhood and see if you can pull out one place in the more than human world that's felt like a supportive and nurturing place for you. You could go all the way back to the tree you climbed as a kid. You could be all the way up right now to the garden that you nurtured all summer outside your door. I'll give you just a couple moments to land on a place that feels nourishing and supportive to you. If you really can't come up with anything, it's also totally okay to imagine one. Not a problem. So if you've got a place, what I want you to do is really walk into it. Like really imagine yourself walking into that place. You're going to have to drop yourself into wherever it is for sure, but then take a few steps in and really take in with your eyes what you see in front of you. And take in as wide and as small a perspective as you can, not just the tree, but noticing the textures that are in front of you, the colors in front of you, the shapes, even the spaces between things. And as you take that in, shift your head to the left and take in the view from there for a couple breaths. And then shift your head to the right and take that view in for a couple breaths. If it would feel good to turn around and take in the view behind you, go for it. You don't have to. But really soaking in all the visual color, shape, texture, beings that are in this place. And then tune in with your ears. Really notice what sounds are here. Notice the sound that's closest to you, the sound that's farthest, that's quietest, that's loudest. Maybe wind, maybe birds, maybe water. Fill in all those blanks for an auditory landscape. Make that as rich as you possibly can. When you've got that symphony of sound filled in, shift your focus to the sensations on your skin. Maybe sun or rain, maybe water, maybe sand, maybe ground. You can even imagine yourself bending down, feeling whatever the ground is underneath you. What does that feel like on your hand, on your feet? What's the feeling of the air around you? And then you can shift your focus to taste, which may or may not fit in your particular place. If it doesn't fit, just keep filling in the sights and the sounds and the sensations. But if there's a taste, maybe salt water, maybe fresh dirt, imagine that in your mouth. Let your mouth really experience that. And finally, also consider, we don't often consider sort of internal experience of senses, but also try to notice how your body feels in balance or out of balance at that in this place. What's your experience of proprioception of where your body is in space, where you are? Just take a few deep breaths, soaking into this place as much as you can. And noticing if there's any particular emotions that are evoked for you in this space, any particular experience that comes up as you settle into this place. We'll do 3 more deep breaths. Just soak into your spot. And when you feel ready, and if you don't feel ready, if you want to stay here for the next hour, please feel free. Feel free to turn off my voice and just stay here. And if you'd like to come back with me, if you're ready to do that, start bringing your attention back to the feeling in your hands, in your feet, to noticing your feet on the chair, to slowly opening your eyes and noticing what's around you in this space. And if you can check in right now with your body and your thoughts, just as we did at the beginning of this, if you can hold whatever emotion was evoked for you as we worked through this visualization, and just jot that down or tuck it away. Notice if there's a difference. There very often is for people. If there isn't for you, that is totally okay. But if there is, notice that. Notice what shifted maybe in just 4 or 5 minutes of just imagining. Just imagining. We're still sitting here in front of a screen. And it's quite possible that you are able to shift your state, your nervous system to a different place through that experience. If we weren't recording this, I'd ask you to share, but that doesn't feel quite right, given that this will be publicly available and I wouldn't want personal experiences attached to that. But I know that in doing this with other groups who I haven't recorded, there's also often feelings of calm and peace and acceptance and hope and joy and love that come up for people. So if that's something that happened for you, you're certainly in good company. You're also certainly in good company if this was really hard and didn't go anywhere. No judgment there by any means. So shifting us back into the science piece of things, there are approximately a zillion ways that nature can support us and we can support nature. And I don't have time for all those because this is a very brief webinar. So I wanted to zero in on 2 particular experiences that are really well supported in the neuroscience and really well supported in relationship with the more than human world. And I'm going to go through the science of both of those and then offer a couple opportunities to experience them as well. So, the two experiences I want to work with through this lens are gratitude and awe. So, gratitude, I I am not on social media much myself, but I have heard from many people that November is the month of gratitude on social media. So you may be really sick of this, which I would totally get if I was seeing it on my Facebook feed, especially in moments where I am feeling so not grateful for anything, which is totally real. So just give your science brain a chance to tune in here, because the cool thing with gratitude is that we do actually have a ton of neuroscience evidence available on why it works. A practice of gratitude increases dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that plays a role in pleasure, reward, and the duration of positive emotions. It increases serotonin production. Serotonin contributes to well-being and mood stabilization. It interestingly activates the part of the brain that's associated with what they call neural pure altruism, which means doing something for others first rather than yourself. So a practice of gratitude actually biases the brain's reward system to others over self. It can actually override kind of our natural way, which I think is really quite amazing. Another really cool thing about gratitude that they've figured out is there's two distinct experiences. There's the felt experience of gratitude, and there's an expression of gratitude. And both help, both matter. However, the expression actually very much deepens the experience on a neurological level. When gratitude is expressed, it increases the activity in the prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain that's responsible for learning and integration and reason. And the more we can get that part of the brain going, the better, the more durable the experience is, the more embedded it is. So expression is a really important level, and it's interesting that it doesn't actually mean you need to express appreciation directly to the person or being or place that you're grateful for. That does not appear to matter, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. But anyway, what matters is that it is expressed in some capacity, whether it's out loud or written down, or even just a thought in your head of sending that kind of gratitude towards someone really concretely and with detail. So that's a really interesting thing about gratitude. And I love it because if you do choose to express in some way directly to another person or place or being, like that other person or place or being also gets to benefit from that expression of gratitude. So it's like, it's just a win all around. The other experience, we'll go through the science a little bit, is awe. And this one is a little less clear. The how on a neurological level, the how all works is a little less clear. The what is really clear, like how, like the what it does for our well-being is clear. The chemical level, not so much yet. It's a pretty new research base. But what is very clear is that awe contributes to well-being by making us feel more connected to other people, by giving us a much greater sense of perspective. And that's perspective in a lot of different ways. It expands our perception of time, of space, of relationship. So in all sorts of ways, it sort of grounds us more realistically in where we actually are and gives us a bigger lens to look at the world through. It makes us more open to modifying our worldview. What a wonderful thing to have in these days. It increases generosity, well-being, and compassion. It contributes to the sense of small self, is the scientific term, small self, which is not a derogatory sort of self-esteem related word. That's actually a really important recognition of our place in the world that isn't actually all that big, which when we're in anxiety and fear and fight, flight, stress response mode, it's really hard to remember that there's this whole bigger picture out there. So awe helps us really ground in the reality that we're pretty small as one human in this big, massive universe, which is actually really great for our well-being. It just like sort of durational experience in nature at 17 minutes a day is really what we need to experience the benefits. It does not take a lot to see these impacts. There's one study that asked participants to do 15-minute walk once a week with a focus on awe, meaning that they were to go out and simply focus on really noticing and appreciating the amazing things around them, whether that was a leaf growing out of a concrete or the clouds in the sky, or that I don't think this study specified being in relationship with nature. So it could have been the amazing wonder of that somehow we invented cars. And yeah, they have a lot of struggles, but wow, we invented that thing to get from here to there. All it took was 15 minutes once a week in awe to note different, markedly and measurable differences in generosity, well being, and compassion. That is not very much. That is really cool and exciting to me. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science of how our brains works and why most likely gratitude and awe can have such positive impacts. And I'm borrowing a lot of this. The framework I'm using is from Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And the connection to awe and gratitude, I'm totally stealing from Laura Sewell of Bates College, who made this link in a talk that I was lucky enough to attend last year. Daniel Kahneman speaks of system one thinking and system two thinking. So system one is fast, it's unconscious, it's automatic, it's every single day. It's things like, think of assuming you're not 16 years old and learning to drive. If you've been driving for any period of time, it's pretty automatic. We don't have to think about it anymore. And thank goodness, because goodness, what kind of energy would it take if we did have to think about something like driving? So system one thinking is really useful. We use it constantly. Another way to think about it is it's our automatic response to things. It's responsible for our fight, flight, freeze response to stress. So we need it. We couldn't live without it. The challenge is it is so prone to error, all kinds of error. We use it all the time and it's full of errors. Errors like it's too fast, so we don't have all the information. Errors like that kind of automatic unconscious thinking. We tend to make it very black and white. We don't have grace for that. That kind of thinking tends to globalize, to sort of lump everything into one category or the other. It tends to catastrophize, to make everything bigger than it is because it's responding to a threat, and then everything's a threat, so you just have to respond. So it's not actually, while it's very useful and necessary, it's not actually a helpful system to respond from to so many of life's complexities. And certainly not, it doesn't help if we live there, if we live in that unconscious, automatic, reactive thinking. It does not support well-being in any way. It keeps us alive, actually, I should be clear. It's really good at keeping us alive. It's not great at keeping us well and thriving. So that's system one thinking. System two thinking really engages that prefrontal cortex. It's slow, it's conscious, it's effortful, it brings in the grays, it's responsible for complex decisions. And best of all those differences make it reliable in a way that system one thinking is not. If we can approach the world and a decision from a system two mindset using all the parts of our brain, especially the parts that humans have that other natural beings do not, we can actually count on our decisions and our actions in the world in a different way as being valid. So this connects back to awe and gratitude because both of those require system two thinking. They require us to be open. They require us to be conscientious and effortful. They require curiosity and wonder. So we get to land in a place that activates our full brain, our full attention, and our full potential for well-being. It gets us out of that super reactive spot and into a really different spot. Now that sounds lovely, but isn't that easy? Of course, because system one thinking is so automatic and so part of our evolutionary experience and daily experience. It's not that easy to get out of. There's a great quote you may have heard that says, neurons that fire together wire together. I've heard so many different neuropsychology people say this, I couldn't attribute it accurately, but the point is that however we continue to think and be, reinforces itself in our brain, and not just like on an abstract level, but actually on a neural level, like those pathways get stronger and stronger and stronger. So if we're spending a lot of time in system one thinking, in black and white, in fast reactive, like that's our sort of default pathway because it's stronger and more built. It actually takes effort and intention to build a pathway for system two thinking. A client I was working with the other day gave a lovely example of she feels like in trying to learn to bring her system to pieces online, she feels like she's walking through waist high grass. And she walks through once and it's a lot of effort because she's pushing through the grass. And she looks back and there's hardly a dent in the trail. The grass has just popped back up. The wind has leveled it out. So she's really finding she has to keep walking back and forth on that same trail and hoping that she'll eventually have fired enough neurons together that that path is really actually a path and she's not wading through the grass all the time. And I love that analogy because that's actually what happens in our brains. The more practice we give our brains, the more defined and clear that path is and the less effort it does take to get there. So I encourage you in anything I'm offering to really consider to practice. And with repetition, it becomes easier. It's not the fun answer. It's not the easy answer, but I think it's the true and neuroscience-ly appropriate answer. So just really quickly, we're going to offer one practice for awe and one for gratitude. And this will just take maybe 2 minutes to think about awe. And there's a lot of ways we could expand on this, but we're going to really try and do it, kind of keep it tight and really notice how awe does not have to be far away from us. We don't have to be able to fly to the Grand Canyon to experience awe in relationship with the more than human world. So what I would love you to do is actually keep your eyes open this time. But you don't need to look at the screen. Actually, please don't look at the screen. I'd love you to look at your hand instead, whichever hand is most easily accessible to you. And just hold your focus on that hand for a few minutes. And try to feel from the inside out the nerves, the blood vessels, the joints, the bones, the tendons that make up this one little part of your animal body. Open and close your hand slowly, trying to take in how that motion feels from the inside and the outside. Imagine all the pieces that go into this hand being able to open and close from your brain down to your fingertips. Notice those fingertips and the unique fingerprints they have that no other human on this earth holds. Incredible. Find something in your reach that might be comfortable to touch and gently let your fingertips, fingers, and palm take in the physical sensations these parts of your body are so able to take in. Consider all that this hand has allowed you to do in your life. Greet a stranger with a handshake, hold hands with a loved one, soothe an upset child with your touch, create art or craft, deepen an embrace, pet a dog or a cat, plant a garden, nurture life. All of that contained in this one piece of your animal body. And notice as you're taking in this miraculous hand of yours, what happens in your body? What happens in your thoughts as you shift your focus to this little piece of your everyday experience? It's possible something shifts for you. It's possible it doesn't. That's okay. But just take a minute to notice. Excellent. So what I again will share that other people have experienced is that sense of small self that I talked about earlier in the science, that recognition that there are so many amazing pieces of ourselves, which are just amazing pieces of a bigger picture. And when we can stop and pay attention and focus on those, all really is all around us. It's not far away. It's a choice to pay attention and notice. So thanks for following me down there. And I'm going to shift. We're going to do a gratitude experience at the end. I want to shift now to talk specifically about, I'm talking about all this lovely, relationship with the more than human world, which is all well and good when it's 75 degrees and sunny for 16 hours a day. And that is not the time we're in. It is dark, it is cold. I'm as resistant, actually, it's not cold today, but this is quite an anomaly. It is definitely dark though. And I am as resistant to daylight savings time as anyone I know. I count down the days till solstice. So I feel the pain of the increased darkness. And I want to really encourage everyone to not let that be a barrier, either the dark or the cold, because there's ways to work with all of it and to embrace all of these things we're talking about today are still fully present, even though we're moving into winter. So the first I want to think about is really kind of throwing some things out to get your mind ready to even think about engaging in your relationship with the more than human world differently in darker and colder times. So one thing to think about is really obvious, but it can't be overstated, the importance of really good clothing and really good gear. And I don't mean gear like skis or snowshoes, although if you do those things, that's great. Really just the gear that keeps you safe when you're outside, both in terms of cold and in terms of balance, because we can't actually have relationship without a basic level of safety. Our nervous systems don't actually work that way. So start with safety, start with whatever you need to be warm. Personally, as someone who spends a lot of time outdoors in the winter and not necessarily in a super active way, I've found fleece lined pants to be really helpful, insulated boots to be really helpful. I'm going with rechargeable hand warmers this year, which I just learned are a thing and I'm really excited about because my hands often do get cold. And one thing that sort of the indispensable item in my winter wardrobe, not every day, but most days around here, getting to be more days, it feels like, is really good grippers for shoes. And I don't mean like the 995 version that falls off your boots like as soon as you put it on. That does not help. I mean the kind that really straps to your boots that can't come off and that has like visible spikes that can really grip ice so you don't have any worry about falling. That's super important and allows me anyway to experience winter in a much more authentic and calm way so that I actually can connect without having part of my brain always wondering if I'm going to fall down. So that's just kind of the logistical mindset. And think now about that because my goodness, if we've learned anything in the pandemic, it's that anything related to the outdoors sells out fast. So don't get to, a season and be like, oh shoot, I really need some of those things. Get ready now. Get yourself in that mindset. Anything you want to do moving forward, I really encourage you to consider sharing your practice and reflections with a partner. I think that's really important. What I have learned over the past several years is that I spent a lot of years connecting with the earth myself. I spent a lot of years connecting with people myself. Both of those are really nourishing and helpful. But what is truly nourishing and helpful on a much deeper level is connecting with people who also connect with the earth. There's just a level of connection and understanding there that I find pretty unparalleled. So, and that's work you can do with someone else. So find a partner. It can be someone who's nearby, it can be that you live with or in the neighborhood, it can be someone across the country, but choose something that you're both going to do and share your experiences with each other. I promise it will deepen your own experience, your connection with that person and your sense of well-being. I encourage you to, whatever you're doing, engage with all your senses, just like that visualization about your place we started with. That is what getting our bodies in the game is what really can shift our experience. So let your brain have a break, let the thoughts have a break, and really connect with all your sight, your sound, your touch, your taste, your smell, all the things. Bring them onto play. Always remember acknowledgement and gratitude. We would never just walk into our neighbor's house and sit down and use their TV and eat their food and then walk out without saying anything. It's not that different for being in relationship with the more than human world. Acknowledge, ask permission even. And my science brain is good jumping up and saying, that sounds really silly. Yeah, it does sound really silly in this culture, in this way of being in the world. However, I encourage you to try it anyway, to walk into a place and greet it and ask permission to be there and listen for the answer. That is definitely a practice. It's not comfortable, it's not natural, it's something I'm still working on myself, but I think is really important to be in any sort of authentic relationship. On the other end of that is gratitude of, we would, just like we would not walk into a friend's house and have dinner, we wouldn't leave without saying thank you. So that's the same, not just because the science says it's beneficial to us, but because it's the right thing to do, because these are living beings in their homes. And if we've had a meaningful experience out there, why wouldn't we say thank you? So remember those two pieces if you can. And especially with what I just said, there might be a lot of thoughts that come up of how strange and weird and that maybe this doesn't feel right. Just be curious, just be playful. It's an experiment. See what happens. There's no right or wrong, there's no judgment. I really just encourage you to give your brain a little space, even with that big science brain that I totally get, to give your brain and your heart a little space to play and see what happens. So I'm going to give you 2 suggested practices, and I have a lot more specific ideas that you can link, that you can ask either Nina or myself for, and will be at the library. So really just specific ideas about how you can deepen your relationship with nature, particularly in the winter, particularly now. So one is beauty photos, and I started this actually with a friend when the pandemic started and everything felt like bad news everywhere. And we were sort of both desperately trying to find some space for something that didn't feel threatening and scary. So we agreed to each take a picture on our phones of something beautiful every day and send it to the other person. Because of who we are, that's typically something in the more than human world, but it doesn't have to be. But it is been really interesting to notice how that's shifted over time. It could be a struggle in the first weeks to first remember to find something beautiful and then find something beautiful. And at this point, I can't not find beautiful things. They're everywhere. Like I fired those neurons fired together enough times that my default is now to see the beautiful things. And I can't tell you how powerful it is, especially in stressful times. It's actually less impactful now that I'm a little more regulated, but especially in the beginning of the pandemic when there was so much chaos. And I can feel it a little bit now coming into winter as well, because that and the increased in cases of COVID, that sort of rush of anxiety and panic coming back, it's becoming more important again. To just have a moment every day where I have to think of something beautiful and I receive something beautiful. And that I send and receive that to someone I love really deepens that, because I'm connecting with that person at the same time without, and I'm coming from a place, and that connection is come from a place of beauty instead of stress and anxiety and worry. We have a lot of that. It's totally fair to make space for something else. So there's one suggested thought. The other one is really taking this time to connect with some natural rhythms and see what that does for your system, your body, your thoughts. One in particular that I'm working with right now a lot myself because of my sort of innate resistance to darkness. I'm really trying to work with sunrises and sunsets. I get to see them all the time. So what if I pause and really try to appreciate them? And that's been really lovely. And by no means am I perfect at this, by the way. This is all an experiment and I'm learning as I go. But it's always lovely that, right now, as we've been speaking, the darkness has come. And if I'd been outside, I would have taken the time to notice that sunset. And that brings up those feelings of awe and beauty and puts me in a place of openness and curiosity and perspective, which is a much better way to start my long winter evening than that sort of rising tension around, oh, why is it getting dark at 4:30? This is crazy making. I get to make that choice. And the more I choose to really enjoy the sunset and start there, the easier my evenings are. Other natural rhythms that you could work with are tides, moonrise, moonset, constellations, just getting to know and be more connected to the rhythms around you, which will sort of naturally, I think, connect to awe and perspective and calm. Another thing I wanted to share with a member of this community reached out to me and shared her experience and her website. And much thanks to Marnie for sharing her Songs of Seeing website. This will be on the resource list. And she's developed some really beautiful, if you can't get outside, which is really real for a lot of people, she's developed a beautiful website that's full of images of nature and words that can be really supportive for healing and growth, and shares her own story about healing through that relationship. So I really want to thank Marnie for sending that along. It's a resource I'll be using, and I encourage you to check it out as well, particularly if actually getting outside is tricky for you. So I'm going to wrap us up. We're almost at time, so I'm going to wrap us up with a really quick gratitude practice and then a poem, and then we will be all set. So in terms of gratitude, just always trying to end in gratitude with any experience of building relationship with the more than human world. So I'd love you to think back to the place that you visualized with all your senses. And I'd love you to really, whether it's the place as a whole or there's a particular being or creature within that place that you feel especially grateful for, start to call up that gratitude in your head, in your body. Kind of notice. Sometimes people will notice sort of a warmer heart or some sensation, some energy around their heart or their core when they're thinking of gratitude. Excuse me. And if you can think of a way, think detail, think what it is you're truly grateful for about this person, this place, or this being. And then think if there's a way, and you don't need to do it now, obviously, but think if there's a way you would want to express this gratitude. It might be right now sitting here, just saying in your mind, this is what I'm thankful for. Thank you for being here. And really let yourself feel that. Let it be a felt experience, not just in your head. It might be something much more concrete. It might be going to the place and offering a poem or a thought out loud. It might be donating, if it's a place that is stewarded or conserved by someone, it might be donating money to support that. It might be cleaning up trash. It might be whatever feels important in expressing gratitude. Think about that and think about if that's something you'd like to incorporate into your relationship with that place. And notice, we don't have a ton of time to deepen into this right now because I talked too long, but notice, take some time afterwards too, if just that intention and practice and calling gratitude in can shift your experience, your nervous system a little bit. Awesome. And I will certainly express my gratitude for you all for listening and being here and being curious and playful today with me to whatever extent you are. And I really encourage you, if you have questions for me, if you have concerns, if you have thoughts, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. My business, you can reach me at my business, which is Elemental Counseling, elemental-counseling.com. You can email me, Corie, Corie, at elemental-counseling.com. So I'd always be happy to hear from you if you have any specific questions or concerns or are looking for more resources. You can also reach out to Nina for any of the resources I'm going to share on paper tonight. Please feel free to do that. She'll have them. And I will close us, hopefully right on time. And I understand if anyone needs to leave earlier. But I will close us with just a poem, a really lovely poem from John O'Donohue, who's an Irish poet that is no longer with us, but left a really powerful legacy of beautiful words and had a pretty strong connection with the more than human worlds. So I'll leave you with a poem by John O'Donohue, To Learn from Animal Being. Nearer to the earth's heart, deeper within its silence, animals know this world in a way we never will. We who are ever distanced and distracted by the parade of bright windows thought opens, their seamless presence is not fractured thus. Stranded between time gone and time emerging, we manage seldom to be where we are, whereas they are always looking out from the here and now. May we learn to return and rest in the beauty of animal being. Learn to lean low, leave our locked minds, and with freed senses, feel the earth breathing with us. May we enter into lightness of spirit and slip frequently into the feel of the wild. Let the clear silence of our animal being cleanse our hearts of corrosive words. May we learn to walk upon the earth with all their confidence and clear-eyed stillness, so that our minds might be baptized in the name of the wind and the light and the rain. Thank you all very much. I'm going to turn it back over to Nina to close us out.
Thank you so much, Corie. That was really, really wonderful. Just the combination of, it was just a great combination. Thank you. I really do appreciate it. And, I too will be looking for those rechargeable hand warmers. Anyone that wants the resources that Corie mentioned can either get them at the library or email me at drilibrary@gmail.com. Also, the book that she mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, Braiding Sweetgrass, that is one that we have in our collection for anybody that might want to read it. It's here. And to all of you, thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this presentation and wish you could share it with others, you can. Corie has given us permission to post the recording on our website. So I'll have the video up in a few days on the event page. People can access it there, but also on the homepage as well at deerislelibrary.com. The library relies upon charitable contributions from friends like you for almost 2/3 of our annual budget. Your cash gift is tax deductible to the extent allowed by law and goes directly to support our many services and programs. In an era where much is needed reinventing, we continue to look for ways to serve this community safely and well. Please, if you're able, consider donating to help us continue. You can visit our website at drilibrary.com and click the donate button, or send a check to Chase Emerson Memorial Library, P.O. Box 9, Deer Isle, Maine, 04627. As always, I can be reached via email at deerislelibrary@gmail.com or by phone at 207-348-2899. Thank you again to all of you for participating in today's event, and have a great evening.